Good evening and a very warm welcome to First Issues. As tonight we come to you from a well-resourced room that was purpose-built for homeschooling by a dedicated mother of three, Ashley Thaba. Traditionally in Botswana, people with children had one of two options when it came to formally educating their children. They could send their children to one of the many schools that the Botswana government has worked hard to build across this country, providing practically free education for their citizens' entire schooling life. Or they could dig deep into their pockets and send them to private schools that are marketed as being better resourced. With the first option, parents have to take into consideration the steadily declining quality of education in our public schools. Over 70% of last year's primary school leavers obtained an overall grade of C. The second method for educating your children may not even be an option for you depending on your income. Private school fees have become increasingly exorbitant, as indicated in this table that we compiled after making inquiries across the city, with parents likely to find themselves paying between 30 to 60,000 pula a year for a primary school-going child, and between 50 to 100,000 pula a year for those in secondary school. For a growing number of parents, these options have become increasingly unattractive, and some, like our guest tonight, Ashley, have turned to homeschooling their children. Our conversations with a mother who has chosen to take on the full responsibility of educating her children reveals a number of motives for parents who choose to take this path, including an inculcation of values that parents esteem, a reduction of financial expenses, as well as providing specialized support. Hear from her experiences this evening how practical and effective this emerging third option for educating your children could be.
With homeschooling, you have to treat it as a job. So you have to treat it as school. So for us, it's 8 to 1. That originally started off when I was homeschooling my youngest, and I had two other ones that were taking naps. So we actually started our homeschooling based on the nap schedules of the other ones. So we would do school from 8 to 9, and then when the other ones would wake up from their nap, then we'd play with them, and then 11 to 1 they'd take a nap and we'd go back to homeschool. So we've sort of kept that. With my standard 5-year-old daughter now, she is old enough that she pretty much does 8 to 1 with only a 30-minute break for like a tea break. But my son does 8 to 9:30 now. Then he takes a break from 9:30 to 11, and then he does 11 to 1.
How do you prepare for this? How do you come up with the coursework? How would somebody looking to homeschool their kids, how would they prepare themselves to do this?
Well, in America it's quite common, so we can buy curriculum. I buy the curriculum, and it tells you every single day, like day 1, this is what you're gonna do. It shows you what you're gonna say, what books you're gonna read. It literally tells you every little thing you're gonna do. So this is one curriculum. This is called Sunlight. This is for my younger child. And then my older children, they use a different curriculum called Rod and Staff. And this one comes up with, you see it has the lessons, which the teacher says, what the teacher does, all the answers are here. Everything is in the book. So I don't really have to do anything. I just have to be able to be literate, and I can teach because the curriculum tells me what to do.
How effective has this proven to be? Do you not find there's maybe some material that's out of your depth, or is that not yet a challenge you've come?
Yeah, I think not yet is the key. Not yet, because it is so everything. I mean, they even comes with the test books, it comes the workbooks, it comes the teacher's guides. So far, like I said, it teaches itself. I just have to read. This is what you say, this is the questions you ask. So far it's not on my depth. I may choose once we get to high school to take my daughter back because the subject matter is getting more complex, but definitely at standard 5 level, no, there's nothing so far that's been too complex.
What is the long-term goal, the end goal? Which curriculum are you looking to do? Are you going to be sitting for PSLE exams or the BGCSE and those kind of things? Is that the focus? Or what is your focus?
Well, starting out, it was something I really didn't have to worry too much about because you do those at Standard 7. But really my focus is to give a more well-rounded education. I feel like sometimes here the schools just teach to the test, and they don't teach a love of learning. And from a psychological standpoint, most of the learning we do in our lives happens from 0 to age 7. And so I really wanted her to have all my kids to have a really big base. So we teach, like if you can see here, this is a timeline of world history. I mean, they have a solid understanding of everything from Adam and Eve to now, and over there you'll see the world. And so we're trying to teach them the world and sciences. I mean, if you look back over there, my daughter is doing anatomy and botany and subjects that are probably advanced for what a normal 9-year-old and 8-year-old would be doing.
I saw the ear and I was surprised, yes.
You should see the anatomy book. It's pretty exciting. But so I just want to teach them to love learning, and so that it builds a foundation. If they go back to school, it's not just I cram for a test,
How do you try to inculcate that love for learning? In which ways do you do that?
I think you see the books that we use, it'll make sense. Like this is her anatomy book. You can just look at it. Like it's fun pictures and like doing like little comics. And then, I mean, you can see here, this is the DNA, the RNA, the lysomes, the mitochondria, the nucleus, centrioles. So it's very detailed. This is the study of medicine throughout, from the Egyptians, the Hebrews, the Greeks, the Europeans. So we've studied all the medicine. And then this is like a cell mini book. And it's just very like, the books are done in such a way that here's a thing on bones, what goes on bones. So it's just very fun for the kids. Like they enjoy doing it because you're learning, but it's in a fun sort of manner.
So far, the case for homeschooling is looking pretty solid. When we return, we take a look at common concerns and challenges presented by this method of educating children.
What is the future of help? It's to help people find the great in themselves. The drive, the passion. Help them find their true potential. Help them stretch. Help them grow. That's why we help people help themselves, help the world, because a little help goes a long, long way. FNB, how can we help you?
Welcome back to First Issues, as tonight we continue our conversation with homeschooling mother Ashley Thaba about the pros and cons of literally taking your child's education into your own hands. She tells us what she has discovered to be the misconceptions that people have about this practice.
I think the most common one is the social perception, which is funny because it's actually the least real issue when you're actually homeschooling. The thing is, when you're in school, most of the time your teacher is saying, be quiet, sit down, be quiet. You actually have very little interaction with other friends. It's not like you sit in class and you talk. You get break time, you get like maybe lunch or recess. I mean, but in homeschool, I'm just more, I have to be a little bit more, intentional. So for example, our street is a really good street because all the kids on our street, they play every day. They ride bikes, they jump, rope, every day they're on the streets playing. So that's there. We're also members of a local church, so that means every Sunday they're in Sunday school with other kids. We were at the gym, which the gym has a place for the kids. I plan play dates. My son does soccer lessons. My daughter does ballet. I mean, there's just things you have to be more intentional, but it's really not in fact, it's probably better because I have some control over who they hang out with. So their social is there. It's just a little bit more like I get to have a say in who they're talking with.
You said that the social aspect is the biggest concern when it comes to homeschooling.
Yeah.
What are the things people should be concerned about?
So growing up in America, one thing that's really big in America is community sports. Like here, I've realized all sports are done through the schools. But in America, you don't start doing sports through the schools until high school. And that's at a varsity level when you're like good, So growing up, everyone does community sports, and it's quite exciting because there's no class. You know, you have your black, your white, your poor, your rich. Everyone's on the community league together, and the community sponsors the fields, whether that be the soccer, the football, the basketball, the swimming pool, and then the fathers volunteer to coach. And so it's a really low price thing. So everyone grows up playing community sports, team sports. Really, that's the thing that I miss the most for my kids, because I feel like team sports was a really big deal to me. I think it taught me to lose, it taught me to win, it taught me discipline. And obviously when your team is 3 people in home, you can't do that. And the problem is the schools don't let you in unless you go there. And there are really my son does play, like I said, at Malapo Crossing, and there's a little bit of sport team there, but it's more practice than games. So that's probably the thing that I find the hardest. The other thing that I think is hard, well, depending on the type of child you have, my son is pretty internally motivated. My daughter tends to be more motivated by the peer competition. So like this week she's been in school, but a lot of her friends have been out. So she's had a friend over every day this week. So doing school with a friend helped her to be more motivated to get her work done faster than when it's just her by herself. So I think the peer motivation of getting your work done because everyone else is doing it, whereas at home there's no one else doing it, so you kind of have to, and then the team sports aspect. Those are the 2 that are biggest to me.
We have reasonably presumed that those who choose to educate their children themselves are partially motivated by the current poor performance of our public schools. Increasing private education fees, on the other hand, are also a possible contributing factor. Our guest adds that there were some other personal motivations for her when she chose to take matters into her own hands. Ashley says high fees are not the only costs to be considered when taking your child to private school.
Well, I alluded to that earlier when I talked about just the wanting to give them a really broad foundation of all sorts of sciences, all sorts of history, just a really strong one thing. My daughter has to do a lot of every day in every subject. I make her write essays. I was trying to see if you can see one in here, but you can see there's a lot of writing that she has to do. And so my husband went to schools through here, and when he got to college in Canada, he found that he was very ill-equipped to just write essays. Like, he didn't get a lot of experience. He mainly learned to test, but not learn to express himself. And it's something I see as a weakness in general. You find a lot of Botswana just never learn to really express themselves, whether that be in the schools or in the homes. There seems to be a shutdown of communication sometimes. So I'm really trying to be very intentional about teaching them to express themselves and to talk and to learn how to talk effectively. And so that was one of the reasons I wanted to do that in the foundational formative years, because now when they're older, habits have set in and it becomes harder sometimes. So yeah, I just wanted to build that. And I also felt like, for me, especially my daughter, when she started school, I could feel her sort of slipping from us. Like, she was this bubbly kind of girl, but I feel like she sort of resented the fact that she's this young little person, and I'm like, all right, go to school from 7 to 3, you come home, you take a nap, you kind of do a little homework, you eat, you go to bed, and the cycle starts over. And then maybe Saturday we could hang out as a family, but then Sunday is church. And then I just felt like she was my child to raise, and I wasn't raising her. I was giving that job to someone else. And that's not for everybody, but for me, I just felt a sense of conviction that during these early years, I needed to be the one raising her and building her up and teaching her what I thought was important. One day when it really hit home, we went to the school and all the kids were playing on the playground. And I got there early, so my daughter came, and then the other kids weren't coming. So the teacher said, everybody come in, and they didn't listen. Then she said, come and I'll give you a sweet, or marshmallow. It was a marshmallow. Come and I'll give you a marshmallow. And then, of course, the kids came running. So then Anna Catherine said, well, can I have my marshmallow now, because I'm going with my mom? And she goes, oh, I don't have marshmallows. I'm just saying that to get them to come, And so then my daughter said, well, you're lying. And then the lady's like, no, I'm just trying to get them to come. And then she looks at me and she says, Mommy, isn't that a lie? And I'm like, yeah, it's a lie. And the teacher was so offended that I would say that she was lying. I said, but you did lie. You don't have marshmallows. And so there was these little things that would happen, like the teacher's going to beat me tomorrow, but I know they're not going to beat them in the school, or like teacher says she's going to give me a sweet, but then she doesn't. Or like the art teacher would say, oh, we're going to paint tomorrow, but they didn't paint tomorrow, And I just, I was thinking, like, I'm trying to raise them with an understanding that even if it's a small lie, it's a lie, but yet 7 hours a day or 8 hours a day, they're around people that have no problem telling them empty promises and empty lies. And so there's just, and then, my daughter, sometimes she said that she was in class and little boys would kiss her, and you'd say, this is private school. You'd say, well, where was the teacher? Well, she wasn't there. And you're like, and this is standard 1. And so, I just was thinking, I don't know if this is how I want her in these formative years to be raised, with learning that lying is okay and having little boys kiss her.
Values that aren't yours.
Yes, values that aren't mine. So I felt like I needed to sort of take back that control during the formative years.
Was the high cost of private education ever a factor in your decision?
Very much so. I mean, it's not the only reason, but for me, I grew up in the States where it's public school is what I went to, and so for me to justify paying that much money, I needed to see a value for money sort of thing. And you're still having to do the homework every day when they come home. You're still having to now drive to school every day, so you've got the commute. It takes me about 3 hours. This is the first year with Anna Catherine. She's about four and a half now. But before then, it's like 3 hours. I do the same education. I would be in the car for 3 hours just driving them, plus homework. So I get to do the same amount of teaching in less time than, So I come back to your question, I'm digressing. But the cost was like, not only am I paying school fees, but I'm paying in petrol, I'm paying in time. And then you still have to do the homework, and sometimes you have to teach them stuff. Like sometimes they'd come home and they'd be like, trying to do tally marks for, counting, and you're trying to teach them, no, if you start doing tally marks, you're gonna be doing tally marks, So I'd have to reteach them a different way. So I just didn't feel like it was a value for my money. At least in the early years, I didn't.
What is the future of help? It's to help people find the great in themselves. The drive, the passion. Help them find their true potential. Help them stretch. Help them grow. That's why we help people help themselves, help the world. Because a little help goes a long, long way. FNB, how can we help you?
Welcome back to First Issues as we continue to compare homeschooling to more traditional methods of educating children. Our guest, Ashley Thaba, says even when having to pay for sporting, recreational, and other classes to supplement your homeschooling efforts, overall costs are far more reasonable than current private education prices.
The thing with the curriculum is it is a bit costly, but not too bad. Like that whole curriculum right there for Caleb would be maybe around $500. That's like 5,000 pula. But it comes with all the books and the lesson plans. So then I used it for Anna Catherine, I'm using it for Caleb, and then I'll use it again for Abby. So when you take 5,000 pula and divide it now by 3, it becomes quite small. Some of these, the textbook I'll reuse, but the workbooks obviously I'll have to buy again. But for the most part, because it gets cheaper every year because you already have some of the stuff, it's much cheaper. So yeah. And again, there's no petrol and no uniforms and all the other school lunches and all the stuff, the extra stuff you have to do as well.
I know you said you've considered that maybe your oldest will go back to formal, Is it formal school? Yes.
Yeah.
When they're
Traditional
older.
school.
Traditional school. When they're older, for maybe high school. Because another question would be, what happens now when you get to now things like science, lab tests, those kind of things? If you do decide to continue homeschooling her, have you thought of that?
Yeah, actually, it's just that my son's stuff is downstairs, but this curriculum actually comes with all the science kits. It has all the experiments and everything. So we actually do experiments. My son is doing physics and astronomy and what's the one, zoology, my standard 2. And so that comes with a lot of experiments. Like we've been studying magnets and light and the different things like that. So most of the curriculums that you buy nowadays, they come with the kits of all the stuff you need to use if we choose to do that. You
said that homeschooling isn't for every parent. But which parent can? Does it have to be a well-educated parent? Does it have to be a stay-at-home parent? Will there be parents who are just unable to homeschool?
You don't necessarily have to be educated. I think the biggest thing is disciplined. I mean, it's very hard to know that 8 to 1 I'm in school when you're in your own home, because it takes a amount of discipline to do that. So I think that's the biggest thing. If you use a curriculum, then you don't really have to be that educated in the sense, okay, you have to be able to read and have a general understanding, but you don't have to be like I don't know, I mean, like this is her botany notebook. I mean, I don't know all about the pollinators and well, I do now, but you know, like some of this stuff I've been learning with her, you know. So a lot of the stuff you can learn with them as long as you're literate. So I think it's discipline, it's basic understanding of, you know, a foundation. And then it's also, you don't have to be a stay-at-home mom, but I think you'd be exhausted if you went to work all day and tried to do this at night. So I won't say you have to be a stay-at-home mom, but one thing that I've worked with a lot of parents, and they realize by the time they work and they pay their school fees and they pay their petrol and they pay their transport and they pay their food and they pay their uniforms and the extracurricular things, it actually ends up washing out, you know? So you may find that someone who's a working mom who has to pay for all this, if they quit, they actually could do that, you know, and it ends up canceling out.
Any words of advice to somebody attempting to homeschool their own children, having had their eyes opened by this conversation?
I think the biggest encouragement to parents is that whether you homeschool or you don't homeschool, to take an active role in your children's life. I think I work with the youth at our church, and a lot of parents tend to sort of farm out like the youth Sunday school teacher or the school teacher, and there seems to be this mentality that, well, that's not my job, I'm paying somebody else. And even government parents, I mean, people that go to government schools, it's kind of like that's somebody else's job. And so I think if you want your kid to grow, it's something you have to, no one's going to care about your kid. I learned that with my second born, that no one will fight for your kid and take care of your kid like you will. And so you can blame all you want and, you know, whatever, but at the end of the day, it's your responsibility to raise your children. It's your responsibility to put the effort. It's not easy. I think sometimes one thing that people do is they romanticize, like, oh, you're a stay-at-home mom, that must be wonderful. No, I mean, it's lonely some days. It's hard, you know, like the kids don't always listen, you know, so it can be exhausting. And as soon as I'm done being teacher mom, then I have to prepare lunch, and then I have to help with homework, and then I have to help them clean their rooms, and then I have my own life that I'm trying to get my own things done. So it's a 24-hour-a-day nonstop. Like sometimes I get so jealous of my husband who gets to go and deal. I tell him, you got to deal with sane people. Like you got to do something today where you got to have a conversation and you show, you know, with schooling, it's just the same thing every day. And so it can be very boring and hard, and it's not as romantic as it sounds, like, oh, you get to stay home and be with your kids all day. Kids are nightmares sometimes, you know? So yeah, that's I guess something I also want to dispel, the myth that it's all wine and roses when you homeschool. Yeah.
For those who would choose to educate their children themselves, with the Botswana primary and secondary examinations in mind, they would have to register their children as independent candidates for these examinations. We have confirmed with the Botswana Examinations Council that there is nothing inappropriate about homeschooling your own children. It is when you choose to educate other people's children that you would need to be licensed. That brings us to the end of our program. We trust you found it as illuminating as we have. Until next Tuesday, it is good night from me, Nameto Samakula, and the First Issues team.